That might be better. And also was in relation to diversifying, Daniel, I was plugging in my infrared camera. And this is a FLIR C2 camera. And FLIR cameras just, you know, help home inspectors do a better job. Because with an infrared camera, and this is about $500, which is affordable, actually. So if you're thinking, oh, $500, don't add to your overhead. Just increase your fee and allow your clients to purchase your fancy tools so that you can be a better inspector. And an infrared camera, let's see if I got my water bottle here on my tool bench, allows you to see things that you couldn't normally see without it. So it's kind of like a flashlight. The word flashlight doesn't appear in the standards of practice. So if you're using a flashlight, I could argue that you're going beyond the standards of practice, because the standards of practice says that you are performing a visual only inspection, not aided by a flashlight. Okay, so a flashlight is a tool that allows you to see things that you wouldn't normally be able to see without it. So if I'm doing a home inspection here and that's a crawl space or something, I can't see what's over there without my flashlight. So a flashlight allows me to see things that wouldn't normally be able to see without it. Same thing with an infrared camera. An infrared camera is like a flashlight. It's no big deal. Just get trained and certified on it, because your brain's already trained on what you can see with a flashlight. But this is a little different. I mean, look at it, right? What the heck am I seeing? I mean, without being trained on interpreting what I'm seeing in my infrared, you could really make some serious mistakes. So InterNACHI has a free online, nationally accredited training and certification program to use one of these. And I like the FLIR C2. It's what is it, 80 by 60, and it's, you know, it's comparable. You know, it's a low resolution, but it won't get you into trouble if you're trained and certified on how to use it. So how does it work? Well, if I get my water bottle and I spray water, it should appear on the floor as this watermark. So that wasn't there just a few moments ago, and allows me to see things I wouldn't normally be able to see without it. So that's just a regular carpet, but if I do one of these, right, it will just appear, and that's slightly damp. So it's really quite amazing on what you can see. And if I wanted to scan the entire room quickly, I could do it in just a few seconds. And I could see if something is cool or hot. Infrared isn't X-ray. It's essentially looking at the temperature surface, the surface temperature of everything. So if that looks a little dark, that means to me, that could be groundwater. Groundwater is cool, and that looks like a cool area there. That could be a spill, maybe it's something around a toilet or a laundry area or some kind of water intrusion into the basement, and allows me to quickly see things I wouldn't normally be able to see without it. Okay, so why is all that important in relation to the standards of practice? Well, and business. Well, this infrared camera for just a few $100s that I'm not going to pay myself, I'm going to increase my price, allow my clients to buy it, allows me to provide value to my services, so that when a potential client, a customer, is looking for a home inspector, they are looking for value. And if the perceived value is overwhelmingly more than the cost, if the perceived value overwhelms the amount of money that it costs a customer, it's a good business decision, right? So what you want to do in any kind of market, Daniel, up or down or sellers or buyers market, is to always diversify your services and add incredible value. And one of the best ways that I added value to my inspection company was to invest in one of these things. and allowed me, one, to do a better job, which is adding value, but you become the inspector with the cool tools. You become the inspector who adds infrared to every inspection. Why would you hire an inspector who can see what you see as a consumer? You know, you're looking around with your eyes, visual inspection, you don't see anything wrong with the carpet. So you want to hire the inspector who sees things that no one else can see. And this little tool for a few $100s, if the receipt greater than the cost. So you have to get business boosted can offer services with incredible value, overwhelming value. And InterNetChi has those resources for you. But this isn't a marketing class. This is a class about how to perform a home inspection according to the standards of practice. We're going to learn about the standards of practice. So welcome to class, everybody. Feel free to ask questions during class. I'm going to try to take a look at my question list here. So please feel free. I'll try to get to all of your questions. And Greg, you didn't miss a thing. I'm always early, just like every home inspector. You should arrive to your property early. Should never be late. Where I come from, if you're on time, you're late. So you haven't missed a thing. And if you need to answer the phone or go to a home inspection, the whole class is being recorded, and I'll send you a link to the video recording so you can watch it later. If you're going to attend, well, thank you for attending. Again, we get a video recording here. You get a certificate of completion, and you get one InterNetChi CE credit hour that you can manually add to your education log. Here's the link to the standards of practice. It's called the InterNetChi Home Inspection Standards of Practice. So we're going to go over the standards of practice, learn about them, and then we're going to inspect this house. I inspected this house, and we're going to apply those standards during that inspection. A little offer for non-members only. If you're a non-member and you're taking this class, I can offer you a discount to join InterNetChi. Why would you be interested in joining InterNetChi? Because once you join InterNetChi, a whole world of opportunity opens up to you. You can access everything that every other member can access. The free online training, the certifications, the business strategy tools and documents and resources, the legal department, free legal advice and documentation, the online agreement system, marketing. We have a marketing department. There's 7 highly creative consultants, essentially, marketing consultants, and they'll consult with you. We have a marketing team, and that's all those resources that I was just talking about. All that's available to InterNetChi members. So if you want to be successful and make a great living being a home inspector, join InterNetChi in order to access all these amazing resources. And I have a discount offer for you if you're a non-member only taking this class. Just email me. Also, like Inspector Coach. So I'm going to go over some tools that I use during a home inspection, but you can find more tools and resources at Inspector Coach, and it's inspectorcoach.com. Let me bring up the web page, and you go to the downloads page. Don't buy anything. Go to downloads, inspectorcoach.com, click downloads, and download the free 8 steps checklist. And you go through the 8 steps, and she's created a step-by-step procedure on how to assess where you are in your business and how to make plans on reaching your goals. And it's a free 8-step checklist. I would highly recommend downloading that. It's free. And then click the inspection tools, and at the top, they're all filtered by accessibility and price. So these are really good prices. So for just $150, one of my favorite tools is the Hydro Shark. It's actually a moisture meter. So if you don't want to do the infrared camera, but you want to detect moisture in some cool way, there's these probes here. And what it does is it gives you an audible and a visual indication that something is wet. and it's extendable so that it allows me to probe through the basement carpet, through the padding, into the subflooring to see if it's wet, or allows me to reach into a drop ceiling tile to see if that's wet, or reach over maybe into the band rim joist area to see if something's wet. So that's kind of cool. And also the Tine Hoe, this is a gardening tool. Been using it for 20 years now, being a home inspector. I heat it up one time and straighten it out so I can probe things and grab insulation and move it. According to the standards of practice, you're not required to measure for moisture, or you're not required to move insulation. So when we're going over the standards of practice, you have to figure out what you want to do. Do you want to go beyond the standards of practice and use a flashlight, and use an infrared camera, and use a moisture meter, and use a Tine Hoe gardening tool? You don't have to. According to the standards of practice, none of that is required. The standards of practice is the absolute minimum you have to do during a home inspection. It's really minimum. And when you do 100 or 200 home inspections, you'll see that your clients are going to demand more from you, not just the minimum. So I find that the home inspectors who go beyond the standards of practice are the ones who are providing incredible value and are in demand. So that's kind of one of the things. Oh, so we're on inspectorcoach.com. The tools are really cool. Here's that infrared camera I kind of like. There's the FLIR C2. And it comes with a case, a waterproof case, and all that cool stuff. So that's Inspector Coach. Okay, so the standards of practice. Let's go over the standards of practice. And where is that link? NACHI.org/SOP. So here are the standards of practice. Let's open it up here. And let's see if I can zoom in a bit. And there's the sections of the standards of practice. Okay, let's see. Alvaro Mendez. So you're having technical difficulties. If you're having any kind of technical difficulties, no big deal. It's being video recorded. You won't miss a thing. But if you want to log out of your window or your tab and then find that link where you registered and just log right back in. It could be in an email or on NACHI TV. And okay, so it looks like we're good. Everyone can hear me? I can't hear you. Everyone can see me? I can't see you. And feel free to ask questions. Okay, so the standards of practice is broken up into sections. And the first section is roof. There's the roof, there's the exterior, there's the basement, foundation, and crawl space and structure. There's the heating and the cooling, then the plumbing, electrical, fireplace, attic, insulation, and ventilation. They're kind of related to each other, and doors, windows, and the interior. Those are the sections, the 10 sections of a home. There's about 10,000 things to inspect. I don't know, many thousands of things to inspect, and we kind of broke them down into 10 sections. Why is this important? Because you want to develop an inspection process. You want to do the same kind of process on every home, regardless of whether it's a condo on a 3rd floor or a big townhouse or a huge McMansion. You want to approach the property in the same way, because if you have a standard inspection process, like for me, I do the exterior counterclockwise on every home, everything. I try to, if maybe it's a row home, right, and I can't get around it, but let's just say it's a detached single house, and I'm going counterclockwise. I'm going to start with the front door and go to my right, and go all the way around to the backyard and come around to the left, and for every bedroom, every room, I go in through the bedroom door, and I go to my right, and I go around like that. If I'm in the basement, I walk down in the basement, I go around the counterclockwise. Why? Because when you get into a groove, you're inspecting the same thing over and over again according to the standards of practice. Defects are kind of like trip hazards. You actually literally like bump into them if you're doing the same thing. If you approach a home and kind of like wing it and listen to your first-time home buyer client, they have questions, like they'll want to go in the kitchen first, or maybe down in the basement, or up in the, or they saw something in the back where there's a pool or something, and that's not part of the scope of the home inspection. You'll be all over the place, and it'll take you all day to inspect the house because you'll be just hitting it all in a random order. So a standard is more than just like what you're required to inspect and not required to inspect. It's actually a foundation upon which to build your inspection. It is used as the starting point, as the blueprint to your inspection process. And the first section is roof. You can start in the kitchen. It doesn't matter. But I highly recommend using this format. It's written in this way to actually help you. So if you show up, Greg, early to the inspection, what are you going to do? Sit in the driveway? Drink coffee? No. You're going to get to work, right? Because you've got a second job at maybe 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. So you get there early. First job's what? 8 o'clock? Get there at 7:30 and do the roof. And then do the exterior. And then the difficult part of the basement, foundation and the heating and the cooling and the electrical and the plumbing, that's the hard stuff. And when you get to the attic insulation, ventilation, doors, windows, interior, that's easy stuff. So do the things that are available to you when you arrive to the property early, and you should arrive early. So let's get to the roof. What are you required to inspect in relationship to the roof? Well, I would say one of the most important things to keep in mind is that you're not inspecting the roof system. You're just inspecting the roof covering materials. You're required to inspect the roof covering materials. And that's really important because that's all you can see. The roof system includes, geez, I could argue it includes the roof covering materials, the underlayment, the layers of underlayment, the ice and water shield, the fastening of the shingle materials, the fastening of the underlayment, the drip edges at the eaves, gutter, and at the rake board, and that attachment. You could talk about the fascia too. That's part of the roof gutter system. Maybe the gutters are part of the roof system as well, because it diverts water off of the roof and collects it, right? So you're not inspecting all that stuff. You can't see the fastening. You can't even see the decking, right? You're not looking, your job is not to confirm that the fasteners of the roof shingle material are going through the decking, which really they should. So when you're in the attic, underneath the floor, underneath the roof, you should look up at the decking and make sure that the roofing nails are popping through. That's code. You're looking at the roof covering materials. How do you inspect the roof covering materials? Well, you're required to inspect them from the ground level or the eaves. Those are the two areas. There's ground. You have to stand on the ground and look up at the roof. What if you can't see it? What if it's a flat roof on a one-story home? You have to disclaim it, that you tried to inspect the roof, but you can't see the roof covering materials. Maybe you have a ladder and you go up to the eaves, the gutter edge, or the rake board, the gable side. You're not required to, but you're required to inspect from the ground level or eaves, the roof covering materials and the other things. Are you allowed to walk upon the roof? Sure, you can exceed the standards of practice. Are you required to? No, you're not required to walk upon any roof surface, even if it's a flat roof, 10 feet above the ground. You're not required to walk upon it. But if I was a home inspector and I can't see the roof covering materials, if I can't see the system or component that's listed in the standards of practice, I'm going to inform my client that I can't. Because they're just going to assume that you're performing a home inspection according to the minimum standard. That's the standards of practice. So at least in the minimum, you are required to inspect from the ground level or eaves the roof covering material and the gutters. If there are no gutters, I write that in the report as a defect. Although sometimes a home is designed to have no gutters, so careful, it could be an architectural feature. Oftentimes in the mountains, there won't be any gutters and downspouts installed. Especially, the concern isn't rain, the concern is ice and snow on a mountain lodge. Gutters, downspouts, vents, that's like roof vents. And also like the dryer vent. The dryer could be venting outside, anything that exhausts outside. Or maybe it's a roof fan, that's an active vent. A passive vent could be a eaves, soffit vents, ridge vent, gable vent, little turtle hoods, yep. Skylights, you have to inspect those from the ground level or eaves. That's difficult because skylights are typically problematic. I tell all my clients, your skylight's probably going to leak first before the roof does. It's sometimes an installation problem, sometimes it's a manufacturing problem, but those skylights, they're either going to sweat with condensate or leak. That's just my experience. Chimneys and other roof penetrations, anything that penetrates the roof, like a vent pipe from an HVAC system, and a high efficiency HVAC system in the attic space. That in and out, those pipes, that penetrates the roof. General structure of the roof from the readily accessible panels, doors, and stairs. So when you're in the attic, that's a perfect opportunity to inspect the roof structure. And you're supposed to describe in your report, what do you put in the report? The roof covering material type. That's it. So if you can identify the type. If you don't know how to inspect a roof and identify types, no big deal. All of that knowledge is readily accessible to you if you're an international member. All of our online courses are free, no cost, no additional cost to members. And you shall report as in need of correction any observed indications of active roof leaks. So if it's actively dripping, if it's actively leaking, which is a 1 in a million chance you'll ever find anything actively leaking, especially a roof, you shall, that means you absolutely must describe or report as in need of correction any active roof leaks. But I was a home inspector for a long, long time. And if I saw any indications of any kind of leak, I put it in the report as a defect and in need of correction. So if I'm on the second floor ceiling bedroom closet that never gets painted, and I see watermarks on the ceiling, below the roof, unfinished attic area, and below the roof, and I see watermarks, I'm going to probe it with my moisture meter. This one or the X-Tech one with the pins or the pinless, something. Or I'm going to touch it with my hand, at least. And if I observe indications of moisture of some kind, maybe with my infrared camera, if it's a different color, I'm going to report it as a defect and in need of correction. I may say that it's wet, or it feels dry, or I don't have any indications of dampness or excessive moisture, but I'm going to report it as in need of correction. If I see a watermark, it should have been painted, especially if they knew that a home inspector is coming and he or she is going to inspect the ceiling of the bedrooms, right? For any indications of roof leaks, they probably would have painted it by now. So if you're selling a home, that's what you do. You paint everything. So if I actually see a bunch of watermarks, I'm going to jump on that and report it as in need of correction. I'm just going to assume it's a defect. What's the worst case scenario? My client takes the report, gives it to their agent. The agent asks the other agent of the homeowner, we observe this. Is this an active problem? How is the performance of the roof? How old is the roof? All this extra information that you cannot acquire during a home inspection. All you have to do is report upon the defect that you observe and deem to be a problem. And that's actually a great point. So I want to go back into the standards, backwards. Let's go to the beginning of the standards and have this roof thing in mind. And let's look at this definition. The home inspection will not reveal every issue that exists or could ever exist, but only those material defects observed on the date of the inspection. You are not required to find every defect. Only the defects that you both observe, I see indications of defect, and you deem it to be material, like something really serious. So if you observe a cosmetic blemish, a flaw in the carpeting, are you required to report it? No, because it's not a material defect. The material defect is it's going to hurt someone, right? Or have an significant adverse impact on the value of the home. Like the whole entire home is filled with mold, right? I had one of those. But a blemish, a cosmetic defect, that's not part of the scope of the home inspection. You're only required to report upon the things that you both observe and deem to be a major problem. What if there's a major problem behind this wall here? Or let's just say this is a closet, a cabinet or something, and on the wall itself there's a hole, huge hole, and there's an active water leak in a pipe, and it's pouring out sewage, right? If I can't observe it, then it's not part of my home inspection. It's beyond the scope of my visual home inspection. So the standards of practice does not require me to report upon all the defects in the home, only the ones that I both observe and I deem to be or consider to be serious, material, major, big, harmful, right? What is a material defect? A material defect is defined right here. And these are the only types of defects that you are required to find in a home inspection. And those are the ones that can kill you or have a serious impact on the value of the home. It's major, really major. And that is all you're required to find, according to the standards of practice. But you'll find that you have to find other types of defects. Your clients are going to insist that you find the dirty air filter. A dirty air filter is not a material defect. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not going to have an adverse impact on the value of the home. But they are going to call you up. If you miss the dirty air filter, they're going to call you up on the phone. Say, you missed the dirty air filter. That's an example. They probably won't, but you know what I mean. Maybe the toilet is loose or something, or a toilet is leaking a little bit, or the dishwasher leaked or something, or there was a shingle on the roof that was, the wind blew it off, cracked. There's like a missing shingle. They're going to call you up on that. It's not a material defect. It's just very rarely have I come across a material defect. I mean, in 12 years of being a home inspector, maybe a handful. One of them was, probably two of them were, a deck. A deck collapse was imminent. The deck, when I got on it, shook, and you could hear it creak. And I could, if I wanted to, I could like pull the ledger board off of the home. I could grab one of the posts. And just, the beam on one of them, I put my hand through, and it was capped with aluminum. So it looked great, beautiful, white, aluminum capped, load-bearing beam on the deck. And I stuck my hand up and I pulled out, captured it on video, pulled out the entire beam in my hand. I went up, I flagged the slider door with tape and wrote a sign and informed everybody, called everybody up and said, do not walk on the deck. Deck collapse is imminent. That would hurt someone, and that falls under the category of material defect. If I didn't report upon that material defect that I found, I would be grossly negligent. And that has only, half a dozen material defects in a 12-year career. It's rare. But you'll find that you'll have to exceed the standards of practice. Because if you're only looking for material defects, you're not going to find anything for a dozen years of your career. Because a deck collapse is very rare. In fact, most homeowners don't know that they have a serious problem. Most homes don't have major problems. And if they do, the homeowner doesn't even know. So don't go back to the homeowner and go, hey, you should have told me about this. Most homeowners don't know if they have a serious problem, and most homes don't have serious problems. So it's very rare that you're going to be reporting material defects. So to provide value that we talked about, Greg, you're going to have to look for other things. Cosmetic problems, cosmetic defects, I call them, minor defects, major defects, and material defects. Cosmetic defects, these are all defined in our InterNACHI glossary, by the way. Only material defect is defined in the standards of practice. A cosmetic defect is beyond the scope of a home inspection. It's like a blemish, a flaw, It's a little stain on the carpet. It's the doorknob that hit the drywall behind the door. My clients are into that kind of stuff because they can see those. I'm looking for the serious stuff, but I'll take a second or two, snap a picture of the cosmetic defect, put it in the report. No big deal. I'm not even going to recommend a correction on that. Minor defect is like dirty air filter, something that the homeowner can do. The gutter is clogged, something a homeowner can do. The thermostat is old, inefficient, and needs to be updated, something a homeowner can do. A major defect is a hole in the roof. You need a roofer, you need a professional, you need a contractor. And a material defect is defined by the standards of practice. Okay, let's go to exterior. How do you feel about, Jason asks, how do you feel about FLIR camera that plugs into your phone? I had one. I found it clumsy, and I don't want anything to get in between me and my business phone. So the one that the FLIR one is attached to the bottom of an iPhone. There's another one, I forget what it's called, but it's also attached to the top or the bottom of a phone. When I'm on a job and I don't have an office manager, I had to pick up my phone and say hello and basically say, yes, I'll do the job and I'm going to call you back later. And I don't want all that. I had it in my pocket for a while and it's just too much. So I kind of like separating my tools, right? Even if like it's a really fancy tool, I forget what tool but there were like 4 features. I think it was a moisture meter. I think FLIR makes it. Too much. Moisture meter, probe, pinless, and it had an infrared camera on it and a laser beam. I mean, that's just too much. What I want is like a tool that does just that, like a flashlight. I don't need a flashlight to be a moisture meter. So I don't need my phone, my business phone that makes me all this money to also be my infrared camera. It's just, it's in the way, right? So I want my infrared camera in my pouch, which I don't have. Yeah, I carry, I'll get it, a nail pouch, 2 pouches in the front and a couple things that clip things on. And it's really nice. So I keep things separate. And my business phone, when that rings, everything stops and I answer the phone. And but that's part of a marketing strategy. In general, no inspector supplies an SOP with the contract. Should we? Legal says, the International Legal Department says, from your contract, your agreement, the agreement between you and your client, there should be a link to the standards of practice. That's NACHA.org/SOP, because it's a live document and it should be linked to that live document. If you include a standards of practice in a document form or something, you could be copy pasting something that's years old. So every year, the standards of practice is reviewed by the advisory council, and it actually has an advisory council of master inspectors, and we review everything in the standards of practice. I would say don't include a copy paste with your agreement. Link it out. So always link out. Always refer to and link out to your standards of practice. So I was sued, right? It's no big deal to be sued. Don't be scared. It's so easy to win if you have everything in line. So you need your inspection agreement, you need your report, and you need your standards of practice, and all those need to be combined, or continuity, right? It's called continuity, where everything is kind of like the same. So that's why I was talking about having a standard inspection process. So everything's flowing the same. I do the roof first, the exterior next, and then I go down into the basement. That's what the standards of practice also, that's the sequence in the standards of practice. My inspection report is written in that way as well. The agreement refers to the standards of practice. So everything is, my home maintenance book that I give at the end of the inspection has the same systems listed as the standards of practice. So everything that I told the judge was, had flow, continuity. And I showed that there are things that I'm required to inspect and not required to inspect. And the things that I'm required to inspect are in my report. according to the standards of practice, and we agreed to that. And my client agreed at the end of the agreement that they read the report and the standards of practice. And they agreed that, and so that was really good. So I was sued because somebody pulled up the carpeting and the padding, I had cat urine in it. It smelled like cat urine. And that's well beyond the standard of practice, well beyond the scope of a visual home inspection. And so it took like 5-10 minutes in a small claims court, and I was done. I sued a couple other times, but when I was sued, I won essentially because I performed a home inspection according to a standard that my client agreed that they read and understood. Jason asks, I thought it would be easier to insert it into the report and limit time required after the inspection is complete. I thought it'd be easier to insert it into a report and limit time required after the inspection is complete. So if we're talking about providing the standards of practice in the inspection report, you can provide a summary of it, I guess, make sure it's summarized. But the actual standards of practice, if you print it out, is 30 pages long. So there's no way you include a 30-page document, a legal document, into an already 40-50 page home inspection report. So you link it out, right? It's not a static document, it's a live document. It includes links. The standards of practice is on a web page. You need to, in your agreement and in your inspection report, link to the standards of practice. This inspection was performed according to the standards of practice, and link it to the standards of practice. This report was written according to the standards of practice, and link it to the standards of practice. There's no way my client will be able to say to a judge, I didn't know, I didn't read the standards. They agree that they do, right? The standards is, again, the foundation upon which to build your inspection process and to build your inspection company, really. Yes, Matthew, he who has the paper wins, right? And it's electronic now, electronic paper. It's just like inspection reports. Inspection reports aren't even printed anymore. They're all cloud-based. Thank goodness, because you want links like crazy. You want your client to read the report and include that they have read the links out. I forget how the legal department says it, but that every link was clicked and read, right? So you can link out to the home maintenance book. You can link out to other information. If you find a defect, you can link out to an InterNACHI article that describes that defect. Like if you find, I don't know, PB plumbing, right? And you want to comment a lot about PEX plumbing pipes, right? And the fittings, the types of clamps. You don't put all that information in the report, you just link out to it. And you have your client agree that they read the report, including all the additional resources that were linked out from that report. He who holds the, what did you say? He who holds the paper wins. I like that, Matthew. Okay. Let's go back to the standards of practice, and then we'll do a home inspection real quick. So the exterior is, you shall inspect a ton, right? And one of them is the exterior wall covering materials. You're not inspecting the envelope of the wall. You can't see inside. You can't see the actual insulation material or the thickness of it, or the deficiencies within the wall insulation. Maybe your infrared camera can allow you to comment a little bit about it, but it's really the exterior wall covering materials, just like the roof covering materials. It's the surface stuff. You don't dig into there and figure out how the exterior siding is fastened to the exterior plywood. No. Eaves, soffit, fascia, representative number of windows. You're not required to bring a ladder to a home inspection. It doesn't say you're required to inspect the second floor, third floor windows from the ground. You can't. So the standards of practice helps limit your liability. There's no way I'm able to inspect everything. And the standards of practice sets everybody's expectation up in order to protect you and allow you then to form your own inspection process. If I know that I'm not required to inspect all the windows, especially the second floor windows, my inspection process is going to be a lot more faster, efficient. I'm not going to blow through the house, but I don't need to inspect every window. In fact, it's impossible to hump a ladder around the second floor windows. Exterior doors, flashing trim, adjacent walkways, stairs, stoops, stairways, ramps, porches, patios, decks. Let's say you don't know how to inspect stairs, stoops, steps, stairways, and ramps. Guess what internet she has? And free online course to members about how to inspect stairs and steps and ramps if your client has a physical challenge. Ramps are really important. You gotta know what a slope of a ramp should be. It could be too steep. If you can't get up into your own home because you didn't know what a ramp slope is supposed to be, I mean, that's on you, really. You're required to inspect ramps. So there's really no excuse to not know how to perform a home inspection. The standard is so minimum, right? And the access to knowledge that you need to perform a great inspection is free and unlimited if you're an InterNACHI member. That's why you should be an InterNACHI member, because it just opens up a whole world of opportunities to you, especially like a university full of information. You shall describe the type of exterior wall covering. That's easy. Is it brick, vinyl, aluminum? And you shall report as in need of correction any improper spacing between intermediate balusters, spindles, and rails. What if a downspout is not diverting water away from the house? The standards doesn't say anything about that defect. That's a defect that I would report and put in as a recommendation. Get this downspout diverting water away from the house foundation, right? Shouldn't be dumping hundreds of gallons of water right in the corner of the house, especially if there's a basement, a ground basement, because that water is going to go right in. But it's not required. What's required? Any improper spacing in between spindles. So you're not required to measure anything according to the standards of practice. However, I bring one of these, and I'm going to use it on measuring if I'm doing the exterior, right? So I'm on the deck, let's say, or maybe there's a handrail guardrail on the front steps. I'm going to measure the space between the spindles. It can't be more than 4 inches. A 4-inch sphere cannot pass through a deck guard, railing, handrail, spindles. That's large enough for a child to fall through. If it's this big, this is a 6-inch sphere, that's too big, right? If that passes through, that's way too big. Only a 4-inch sphere. It can't pass through. So it has to be tighter than 4 inches. So I'll bring my measuring tape and pull it out, click. I'll actually take a picture of me measuring. I don't have to measure every spindle, but if there's a space that's open. Now, what if the agent says, oh, but that railing is grandfathered. It was built to code in 1997, right? So after chuckling a little bit, I'll try to explain to the agent that I don't care when the house was built, right? Because if it's a space that's large enough for a child to fall through the deck railing, I'm going to report that as in need of correction. That's a safety hazard, just like any defect. So if it was brand new, if it was built brand new, the deck is new, the entire house is new and the deck is new and it's just built, no one's lived in it, brand new home, and I see a space that's too far apart, I'm going to call it as a defect. If it's 100 years old, I'm going to call it as a defect as well. So I'm essentially saying that you should inspect without any regard to the age of the home and look for defects. And don't let anybody say, well, that was grandfathered because it was built to code. Remember, we inspect millions of homes every year, existing homes that were built to code, and yet they're modern day defects. Let's say the home was built before GFCIs were invented. That doesn't give you an opportunity to not comment on a missing GFCI. Smoke detectors, they keep adding where smoke detectors should go. Now it's in every bedroom, every hallway, every floor. They just keep adding it. You know why? Because people get hurt. There's a fire in a house and they realize if there were only more smoke detectors, maybe some people didn't have to have that experience. So every code iteration is improved, unfortunately, because someone got hurt. That's what code is all about. So when someone says, well, you don't have to put that in a report because it was built to code. Well, that doesn't mean people aren't going to get hurt. You know, if you find a defect, you put it in the report, you bolden it, you make it red, and you turn it into a recommendation for a correction. The other sections are, you have to inspect the foundation, basement, crawl space, and structural components. So for a crawl space, that's a lot of fun. You just suit up, you protect yourself, grab one of these, don't breathe anything crazy in an attic or a crawl space. And then describe the type of foundation. That's pretty easy to do. And then the location of the access to the underfloor space. So how'd you get into the crawl space? Was it from the outside, from a hallway? Just describe where that access is. And then report as in need of correction, any indications of wood in contact or near soil. There should be an 8-inch clearance between the bottom of a siding and the ground on the outside. Observe indications of active water penetration. We talked about that. If I see watermarks in the ceiling, I'm just gonna assume that it's active. I'm gonna ask the seller to explain. And report indications of possible foundation movement, such as drywall cracks. So look at the top right, top left corners of a door or a window and look for cracks there. That's pretty common. A foundational crack, if there's displacement like this, so the cracks, right, and it moves, displacement, which is movement or leaning or something like that, that's a correction is recommended and further evaluation by a structural engineer. If the crack is opened up more than a hairline, I'm gonna call it as a correction and further evaluation. I have my crack width ruler. Oh, that's backwards. There we go. You can just Google this. I don't think we sell it because it's just like 10 cents or something, but it allows me to measure actually a crack. Yeah, so I'll actually use that and take a picture of it. So, because if I say hairline, people don't know what that means. And any observed cutting, notching, or boring of framing members. Like you can't just put a 4-inch hole in a floor joist in the middle third, right? That's a rule. So if you don't know those rules about where you can cut, notch, or bore a hole into a solid load-bearing structural member, framing member, we have a course on that. Heating. Shall describe the heating system using normal operating controls. Normal operating controls include the thermostat and the service switch. Sometimes there's an emergency shut off. It's usually red at the top of the stairs or somewhere away from the heating system appliance itself, the room itself. But there's a service switch, there should be one, so that you can get to the unit and turn it off. Usually, like on a furnace, that's what you turn off to get to the air filter, and then you turn it back on. Those are the normal operating controls. If the pilot light is not working, do not ignite it. If the ignition isn't, you don't turn that on. Don't turn any valves or water valves or fuel valves or any other switches other than those 3 things. Those are normal operating controls. Thermostat, shut off switch, emergency shut off. Not the breaker, not the electrical breaker, anything else. You shall describe the location of the thermostat, energy source, is it electric, baseboard, is it furnace, a gas, propane, and the heating method. Is it radiant heat from like a steam boiler, radiator, or is there duct work? Is it forced air? Inspector shall report as in need of correction anything that doesn't turn on and inaccessible. Same thing with the cooling, basically the same stuff. Turn it on using normal operating controls. Where's the thermostat? How is it distributed? Is there ductwork or not ductwork? No ductwork. And anything that didn't turn on or inaccessible, you make that as a correction. Plumbing, there's a lot to inspect with the plumbing. I basically think of water coming in, drain coming out of the house, water heating up, and water being distributed. And then in the fixtures, everything is turning on and hot and cold. Hot on the left, cold on the right. That's what I think about when I do plumbing. And if there's a sump pump with an accessible float, kick that on. And you're gonna describe all this other stuff. So when a section says, I don't know if you've seen the pattern in the standards of practice, but it's essentially 3 things. It's broken up into 3 things. This is what you're supposed to do. The inspector shall inspect. This is what you're supposed to write. The inspector shall describe. And then this is what you have to put in the report as a need of correction. And it says inspector shall report as a need of correction. How do you remember all this stuff? I mean, look at plumbing. There's, you know, a dozen things that you have to inspect, 2 dozen. Cheat. Don't use your memory. That's why I recommend using a mobile device, right? And putting your software on your mobile device. And within the software, there's usually a place for notes only to the inspector, for your eyes only kind of thing. So you go into plumbing and you go, what am I supposed to inspect again? Oh yeah, there it is. I can inspect that and that. Okay. And you go back to work. So carry the standards of practice with you. Carry your inspection process with you. Develop your own checklist. It's called a template, a report template. And you put it in your software and bring it with you. This allows you to perform a better inspection because you can't make a mistake. It's right there in front of you. You don't have to use your memory about what am I supposed to inspect? This will jog your memory. This will remind you what to inspect. This will keep you on track, right? So it reduces your liability because you make fewer mistakes when you carry the actual standards of practice or your checklist based upon the standards of practice with you. Where are we? Plumbing, electrical. There's even more things to inspect with the electrical. However, if you follow it, it actually starts on the outside and comes all the way in. So you're inspecting the entire system with the components. So service drop, overhead conductors, attachment point, service head, the gooseneck, the drip loops, the service mast, the service conductor, the raceway. Then you get to the electric meter in the base, and then service entrance conductors to the panel, and then the main disconnect, and then the panel boards, and all the circuits and breakers, and then the grounding and then it goes into the AFCIs and GFCIs and all that stuff. So it's kind of like the flow of the electrical system from the telephone pole, utility company, all the way to the device. You have to describe how much amperage there is, only if it's labeled. If it's not labeled, disclaim it. I don't know how much. It could be 200 amps, 100, I have no idea. And the type of wiring observed. And then there are a few hazards that we should report as in need of correction, especially if there are missing GFCIs and AFCIs and smoke detectors are absent. But look at how much you are not required. So the 4th section in every chunk of the standards is what you're not required. There's things that you are required, small amount, and there's a lot of things you're not required. Like you're not required to operate any electrical systems that are shut down. You're not required to remove panel, board, cabinet covers or dead fronts. You're not required to operate or reset overcurrent protection. If a breaker is off, you're not required to turn it back on. You're not required to test any security or fire or alarm systems or components or warning or signaling systems. You're not required to measure or determine the amperage of the system if it's not readily labeled. So it goes on and on. You're not required to inspect exterior lighting. So if the front pole light is off, I try to find the switch, and if it doesn't turn on, I'll take a picture of it. But actually, if I missed it, right? Like the landscaping lighting is all trashed. That's really not part of a home inspection. So you should know what you're not required to inspect. If you don't, you'll be there forever inspecting spark and lightning arresters. You're not required to inspect those, right? The fireplace, that's pretty easy. Basically, don't forget to open and close the damper door. Attic insulation and ventilation, that's fairly easy too, because most unfinished spaces tend to not have really safe, adequate access. So in an attic space of a home where the roof is truss built and the insulation is blown to 14 inches with loose fill insulation, I'm not going to disturb that insulation. I'm not required to. I'm not required to enter any space that I feel is hazardous, and it's hazardous if there is no flooring. And that flooring better be 30 inches wide, and there better be a light fixture for me, because that's like basic code requirements. And that's usually it. So I'm like up to my waist or chest, and I'm looking in the attic with my flashlight, and that's about all I can report upon. What am I supposed to report as a need of correction? The general absence of insulation or ventilation. in unfinished space. So if I go up in the attic space and I think there's not enough insulation, I'll report that as a needed correction. Doors, windows, and interior, pretty easy. Again, it's kind of like on the outside, a representative number of windows. Inside, it's even less. A representative number of doors, representative number of windows, a representative number of wall outlets, switches. You don't have to inspect everything. You're not required to. You're not responsible for everything. So there are a lot of things you have to inspect, but there's even a lot more that you're not required to inspect. Garage door openers. So there's a 10-step checklist in our interior course, free online to members. And that 10-step checklist should be in your software so that you know the 10 things that you should inspect when inspecting the garage vehicle door openers using normal operating controls. So we've got you covered. Whatever is required in the standards of practice, we have courses that you can take so you can perform a home inspection according to the standards of practice with all that good knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need. Okay, so we are about 15 minutes in. I've got 10 minutes left. I want to share with you a home inspection that I did and a report that I wrote. So here's a report. And remember when I said that your standards of practice is the foundation upon which to build your inspection process and your report? Well, here's my report of a home inspection report that I wrote. And it starts with chimney. That's like a system. That's a chunk. That's like a chapter of a book. I write my reports according to like in chapters, and each chapter head is a system. That's the title of the chapter. And then there are sections of that chapter, and those are the components. So here's the chimney section, and there's the chimney stack. There's a major defect because this is an unlined chimney. And then I have my observations and chimney flashings and chimney flue. So those are the components of the chimney. Here's the roof system. Asphalt shingle, I describe the type of roof covering materials, and then I go into the components. I can estimate the age, give a general observation of the condition, number of layers, the flashing, the ventilation, gutters and downspouts. Third section, exterior. Surface water management, how does the water go away from the house? And then other components of the exterior system. House wall covering, it's vinyl, there's stone, there's driveway and parking area, there's walks, there's steps and handrails, there's exterior water faucets, there's receptacles and GFCIs. So it goes from section to components. And that's how I inspect. That's my inspection process. I think of the system as a whole, and then I inspect every component of that system. And in my inspection report, system as a whole, and I list every component of that system in the report. And I try to throw as many images in there as possible. So let's do a run-through, really quick run-through of a home inspection that I performed. Let's see. Boom, 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 boom. So, according to the standards of practice, you're not required to walk upon any roof surface. But I exceed the standards of practice for all my clients, and I get up on the roof. Why? Well, I've built homes, I'm trained, I know how to safely get up on a roof, and I thought it added value to my home inspection. Because every time I got up on the roof, I saw something that I thought would be impossible to see from the ground surface or the eaves. So I kind of did a better inspection, but you're not required to. However, well, we talk about this in the marketing. If you and I were competing and I got up on the roof and I put those pictures in my report, that kind of shows what I do, how are you going to beat me in the market? If I think that's adding value and my clients value hiring a home inspector who gets up on the roof, how are you going to beat me in that? Maybe you're going to fly a drone. That'd be a really good way that you and I, as friendly competitors, could have some fun in the same market. So I'm required to inspect the roof, covering materials from the ground or eaves, but I'm exceeding the standards of practice there. So that's my shoes and my hands, inspecting and describing the asphalt shingle covering. I'm required to inspect the roof penetrations, remember, and that's a vent pipe from the plumbing system, and that all looks good. I'm required to inspect the fireplace, including the chimney. I'm gonna inspect the chimney cap. That all looks good. And I'm required to inspect flashing, which is when maybe the roof covering intersects with a wall, like a chimney stack. So I'm gonna inspect the flashing areas and any kind of vent pipes and chimneys and flashing. There's the ventilation, so that's a ridge vent. You're required to inspect the ventilation. There's a satellite dish there. I'm not required to inspect satellite dishes. And there's gutters and downspouts. So the downspouts are diverting water away from the house. You can see the extensions. There's the sump pump. I'm required to inspect the sump pump. If the float is accessible, the standards of practice says, try to kick it on. There's the siding, exterior wall covering materials. I'm required to inspect those and describe them. The crack in the foundation. That's the third section, right? Structural, crawl space, foundation, basement. And if I find a crack, I'm going to, I don't think I have a picture of it in this series, but I'm gonna use my crack gauge ruler, take a picture of it and recommend further evaluation. This is bigger than hairline. So there's actual structural movement here, and it's actually cracking apart. I'm gonna put that in the report. We need a structural engineer, and there it is. I don't have time to draw arrows and little circles and different colors and stuff. This is my arrow, so I just point to what I'm talking about and snap a picture. Vents, all the exhausts, remember the vents? You have to inspect all the vents. Water faucets on the outside. I include the fence. It's not required by the standards of practice, but I include it in the yards. There's the deck. There's the deck attachment. I want to make sure it's not a major deck collapse, right? That's imminent. So that looks good. And these are all the pictures that I take during a home inspection, and I try to put at least half of them in the report. So I'll take maybe 200, 300 pictures, and I try to do at least 80 of them in the inspection report itself. And there's me. Remember the space between the spindles? So I get my measuring tape out and I take a picture of it. And that's a defect, by the way. The space is too far apart. A 4-inch sphere must not be allowed to pass through that space. I test all of the exterior receptacles because I'm required to. The vinyl siding, I'm required to describe the type of vinyl siding, but that is a defect. It looks like the grill got touched the vinyl siding and melted the vinyl siding, so I'm gonna put that in the report. It's not a major problem, but my client would probably call me up and say, hey, did you see that? And because I did, I'm gonna put it in the report. The exterior looks pretty good. Here's another system, the air conditioner system. Exterior receptacle, I'm sorry, the shut-off switch for the system is leaning a little bit, so I'll put that in the report. And there's another crack by a window. It's wide open, and it was patched with mortar. That doesn't do anything. It's kind of like hiding. It's kind of like a Band-Aid. And there's the gas coming into the house, fuel supply. So I know that the energy source, remember that's required by the standards practice for the heating system, describing the energy source, natural gas. So there's the electrical meter and the grounding wire and the grounding rod. There's the steps, remember steps, stoops, stairs, ramps. The porch post is actually in the pathway of the required 3 feet wide egress to the front door. They installed the post in the egress path. So that's an odd thing to describe, but it's a defect. I think they didn't fix it, and no one did. They just walk around the post. Probably hit it with their shoulder after a while. And there's the air filter, remember? That's a minor defect. I put it in the report. High efficiency air filter there, electronic air filter. There's the gas burners, gas valve. So identify the components of the system. There's the sump pump. If the standard says if the float is accessible, try to kick it on. It's not, it's a sealed sump pump, but it's plugged in and discharges outside. There's the radon system. Radon system is not part of a home inspection, but if I find a radon system, I'm trained and certified by InterNACHI, because I took the radon course, and I have a checklist. There's a checklist, a standards of practice checklist for inspecting a radon mitigation system. So you can inspect whether the system is meeting the modern standards. And if you're doing a home and the radon system was installed 10 years ago, it's probably out of compliance. So it's kind of like a neat thing. And there's my tools from many years ago, the gardening tool and the moisture meter by the hot water tank. And you're required to inspect the hot water system. There's no problems here. Cold water coming in, public water supply coming in. There's the main meter and drain going out. Missing a strap for the drain waste pipe. And there's some structural crack repair with epoxy, which is really good from the inside, but the outside cracks are observable, and we need a structural engineer to come back in. You're not required to move insulation, but there's my gardening tools where I move insulation and I put it right back, no one knows. I want to inspect actually the band rim joist where the deck is, because if there's a water leak, it will often appear as a water leak at that area. So you're not required to move any insulation, but I do. 200 amps, it's labeled. Not required to move the dead front cover, but when I do, I often find a defect. So I have a defect here. It's a 20 amp breaker on a 14 gauge wire. The size of the breaker is too big for the small gauge wire, and that's a defect. Insulation in the attic, no flooring, well insulated. I can see the general roof structure, that's required by the standards of practice. No roof leaks, no indications of active roof leaks. There's the radon fan. Unfinished spaces, you're required to inspect for insulation. The general absence of insulation would be a defect. That's required by the standards of practice. I flush the toilet, run the sink, turn on the shower, turn on the tub all at the same time, see what happens. And I pound on the tiles to see if there are any loose tiles. Check the GFC eyes, turn on the tubs. So you're supposed to run all the water at all the fixtures. So that's what I do. And a representative number of doors and windows and smoke detectors. And that's a cosmetic defect. That's a wrinkle in the carpet. I decided to put that in the report as a cosmetic defect. No big deal. No big recommendation to get this fixed. I just put it in the report because I know my client's going to call me on that. Did you see the wrinkle in the carpet? There's a laundry, there's the garage, 10-step checklist to inspect a garage door opener. I know how to do that. If I forget, it's in my mobile software report. There's the chimney. Somebody stuck a rag in the flue. So that's no good, right? So that's a defect. It's a good thing that I'm required. The standards of practice says that I'm required to open up the damper by hand if I can, right? And if I did, well, I'm going to take a picture of it. And as soon as I did, bam, I got the picture of the defect there. And the doors, windows, wall receptacles on the first floor, that all looks good. The interior looks good. Taking pictures of anything. There's the kitchen, the island, run water at the sink. So run water at all the fixtures. I turn on the stove and oven. That burner didn't turn on for some reason. I turn on the microwave, using my little microwave leak detector from Internachi. It's kind of cool. So I put this and a wet rag, usually a paper towel, wet a paper towel, throw it in there and put my microwave leak detector. And it's really just shock and awe. That's all I used it for. And I made sure my client or their agent was behind me. And this lights up when it gets hit by microwaves. It's kind of a neat thing. Turns orange. That way I know it actually works. But also the wet rag starts to steam up too, so I know it's actually working. And then I use a short cycle on the dishwasher. And that's it. Let's see. So Raul asks about the clearances from the ground for EIFS, E-I-F-S, or stucco. It could vary a little bit, but the code mentions 8 inches. Used to be 6, now it's 8. And I kind of like that 8-inch clearance for any kind of siding. I know stucco is masonry, but the the wooden frame stud wall that the stucco is attached to, I know that sole plate is right there somewhere, and it's probably wooden, even though it's treated. So I'm kind of a stickler about clearance. I come from an area of Pennsylvania, we call it Pennsylvania, because it just rains all the time. And you need clearance between the wooden structural components of the home and the ground surface. So if you want to know more about those details, Raul, we have a stucco and EIFS course. It's video-based course. It's really good. It's like 24 hours long though, because we go through all the 12 systems, different types of stucco exterior covering. When doing inspection, is it normal, Glenn asks, is it normal that one does the inspection and the other one does the report? Right, we used to have a team of 2 inspectors, and we did 3 inspections a day because it's really fast. But in the beginning, we had one inspector basically do a lot of the work, the heavy lifting, and the other one doing the report, because way back when, we actually had NRC forms, I think they're called, where you press through and then you rip off the different pages and staple them. It was really bad. Now, software, you can have multi-inspectors with the same software, and you're entering the data at the same time in the same software. So that's what I would use, a software that handles more than one home inspector actively entering data into a report software. But you know, I could do a home inspection alone. I don't need anybody, especially if I'm using a mobile device that allows me to perform a home inspection and write the report as I inspect. So go mobile. Find a software that has a mobile device. And if you registered for the class, you get a link to the video recording. We record all of our classes on Nachi TV, and you get a certificate of completion. And this class was about an hour, so you'll get 1 InterNACHI CE hour. And the standards of practice is at nachi.org/SOP. And if you're a non-member attending the class and you want to join InterNACHI, just email me and I'll give you a link to join at a major discount. And remember those resources from Inspector Coach. I kind of like that resource there, especially the tools and the free checklist, that 8-step checklist to build a successful business. My name is Ben Gromicko. I'm from InterNACHI. Thank you, everybody. If you need to contact me, that's where you'll find me, nachi.org. And I'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.
Very cool. Well, I took a lot of notes, and that was very helpful. So
cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really fun to the fact that we even offer that for it's great. So
yeah.